The music was supposed to be soft, gentle, something my daughter might hear in the womb and feel safe to. I'd spent 2 hours building that playlist. Sufjan Stevens, Gregory Alan Isakov, a few lullabies tucked between indie acoustics. I imagined warm light, paper garlands swaying slightly by the window, maybe even a few people quietly crying happy tears over tiny socks and pale pink cupcakes. That was the vision. That was the dream. And for a moment, it almost looked real. The cupcakes were arranged perfectly on the 3-tiered stand I'd found at a thrift store and spray-painted rose gold. The cake, red velvet, from my favorite local bakery, sat in the center like a crown. I had tied soft pink ribbons to the chairs myself. 8 months pregnant, belly round and feet swollen, I'd climbed on a stool the night before to hang the handmade "Welcome, Baby June" banner above the fireplace. No one offered to help. No one asked if I needed anything. But I kept smiling through it, because this was going to be mine. I didn't ask for much. Just a single afternoon where the attention wasn't borrowed, where I wasn't background noise to someone else's excitement. Just a few hours where people looked me in the eye and said, "You're doing great." A day where I wasn't the family's unpaid housekeeper, babysitter, therapist, and ATM. I didn't want a grand party, just warmth, just a little kindness that didn't have strings attached. I paid for everything myself, the food, the drinks, even the plastic cups and cutlery. I cleaned the house until the scent of my father's cigars was drowned out by vanilla candles. I arranged the fruit plate in a perfect gradient. I added handwritten tags to each dish, even though most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I noticed, because I was trying to create something beautiful, something soft, something mine. I remember standing in the center of the living room right before the guests arrived, resting both hands under my belly and whispering, "This is for you, baby girl." And for the first time in months, I actually felt proud of myself. Then the doorbell rang. The first cousin arrived with a small package wrapped in yellow tissue paper. Then my aunt came in with baby books. A neighbor brought sparkling apple cider. I offered hugs and smiles and made space in the entryway for coats and purses. I kept telling myself, maybe this time they'll see me. Maybe this time I won't disappear behind someone else. I was wrong. It started slowly. A familiar clinking sound, subtle at first, then sharper. My mother tapping her wine glass with the side of a dessert fork. I turned, thinking maybe she wanted to make a toast, something sentimental. She smiled. That tight, polished smile she used at church events and weddings when she wanted the attention without seeming like she did. My father stood next to her with his hand resting proudly on her shoulder. Behind them, just out of focus, I saw Logan rocking on his heels, holding a white envelope and trying not to grin. Before I could say anything, before the cake was even sliced, my mother's voice rang out, syrupy and sweet. "We just have a little surprise we'd love to share with everyone," she said, drawing in the room like a magnet. "Before we celebrate the new arrival, we wanted to honor something very special that just happened in our family." Something tightened in my stomach. And not just the baby moving. Logan stepped forward, practically glowing. He held up the envelope like it was the Olympic torch. "I got in," he said loud and clear. "Stanford. Full ride." Gasps. Applause. Someone actually shouted, "No way." My Aunt Rachel rushed forward and threw her arms around him. The same woman who, 10 minutes earlier, had handed me a stuffed fox and told me how excited she was for the baby. Now couldn't even look at me. It didn't take 5 minutes. The shift was immediate. Chairs turned toward Logan. The snack table I'd spent hours assembling became his congratulatory buffet. My cake, uneaten, suddenly looked out of place like an afterthought. One of Logan's friends, who I didn't even know had arrived, shouted from the hallway, "Where's the party at?" Someone else had already plugged in a portable speaker. Bass thumped through the floorboards, swallowing the lullabies I'd carefully chosen. And just like that, my baby shower was gone. No one said it directly. They didn't have to. The celebration had been repurposed, rebranded, claimed. I was still holding a cup of ginger tea someone had handed me, the soft pink sash around my shoulders reading Mom-to-be like some cruel joke. One of Logan's friends dumped his backpack onto the armchair where the baby blankets were stacked. Another elbowed past me on the way to the fridge. The gifts were moved to make room for soda bottles and chips. I heard my mother say, casually, "We'll cut the cake later, once things calm down." But they never did. Instead, someone set a bottle of cola too close to the cake. It tipped, and a river of fizz slid down the side, cutting through the frosting like it didn't belong there. I reached for a napkin, still hoping to salvage it. When that didn't work, I got down on my knees, 8 months pregnant, blotting the table before the sugar hardened. That's when someone stepped over me. Didn't say a word, didn't pause, just walked over my hunched body to give Logan a hug. I froze. Hands sticky with frosting, knees aching, back stiff. And above me, laughter exploded. Joyful, loud, completely unbothered. In the next room, Logan was already talking about campus visits and dorms. My mother chimed in with pride, bragging about the tutors they'd hired, the sacrifices they'd made. The same mother who once told me that college was a scam, that I should just get a job at the grocery store. So I did. I worked nights, packed orders for my little online shop, built something from nothing. I never asked them for anything. But somehow, they still believed everything I had belonged to them. I stood slowly, napkins balled up in one hand. The decorations I'd strung with trembling fingers were crumpled now. The baby's name banner had been pushed aside for a hand-drawn sign in bold red ink. "Congrats, Logan." No one looked at me. No one even noticed I'd stopped smiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked into the kitchen, rinsed my hands, dried them on the dish towel I'd embroidered last spring, and went to my room. Behind me, the music pounded. But it wasn't my music. The house wasn't mine anymore. Not really. I sat on the edge of my bed. My body ached. My head was clear. Then I reached for my phone and opened a folder I'd been building quietly for weeks. I didn't argue that day. But I also didn't forget. The first bass drop rattled the windows. It was sudden, jarring, and completely wrong for the room, dressed in paper peonies and pastel streamers. One of Logan's friends, some lanky boy with sunglasses perched on his head indoors, had brought in a portable speaker the size of a small cooler. He parked it near the fireplace, right under the Welcome Baby June banner, and hit play like he owned the place. The music pounded through the walls. Gone were the lullabies and soft acoustics I'd chosen with so much care. Instead, lyrics I didn't recognize blasted across the room. Something about girls, beer, and never going home. Logan laughed, threw an arm around someone's shoulders, and yelled, "This is insane!" like it was the best party he'd ever attended. It wasn't even his house. I stood at the kitchen entrance, one hand resting under my belly, the other still damp from rinsing frosting off my skin. I watched them pour soda into plastic cups, push the baby shower gifts into a corner to make room for bowls of chips and half-eaten pizza slices someone had ordered without asking. I saw my cousin's handmade diaper cake, something she'd clearly spent hours crafting, get shoved off the center table to make space for a Bluetooth speaker. The scent of vanilla candles was overtaken by cheap cologne and microwaved burritos. A girl in a Stanford hoodie, probably one of Logan's classmates, waltzed in and plopped herself onto the couch, crushing 2 of the decorative pillows I had hand-stitched the month before. She glanced at the baby bottle centerpiece and scoffed. "Is this like a real baby party?" she asked, as if she were standing in a petting zoo. Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. The baby shower was already gone. My mother floated through the chaos like she didn't see it, or maybe didn't care. She clinked glasses with one of Logan's old soccer coaches. My father was pouring punch into red Solo cups. At some point, Logan turned the volume up even higher, shouting over the music about choosing dorms and how he might go pre-med. unless something cooler comes along. I stood there, invisible. Not because I was quiet, but because no one was looking for me. My sash had twisted to the side. The words "Mom-to-be" drooped against my shoulder like a forgotten name tag. The cupcakes had gone untouched, their delicate pink icing slowly melting under the kitchen lights. I saw a plastic fork stabbed into one at an awkward angle, like someone had tasted it, didn't care for it, and moved on. A bottle of root beer tipped on the counter and started rolling. I grabbed it before it could spill again. My legs ached. My belly pulled at my spine. But what hurt most was knowing this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding or bad timing. It was a choice. They chose him. Again. I moved toward the living room to pick up the baby books that had been dumped on the floor. As I leaned over, another one of Logan's friends brushed past me, laughing, carrying a bag of chips, not even noticing he'd knocked over a framed ultrasound photo. I caught it before it hit the floor, held it in both hands, stared at the tiny black and white blur inside the frame. That was my daughter, still growing, still waiting, and she deserved better than this. So did I. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from the noise. They'd all left hours ago. Not from the physical ache, though my back throbbed and my feet felt like bruised fruit. It was the quiet. That thick, eerie quiet that settles over a house after something sacred has been broken. I sat on the edge of my bed with the ultrasound photo in my hands, the same one I'd caught mid-fall. The glass was cracked now, a thin line running across the top like a scar. I stared at it in the dark, and all I could think was, it's always been like this. Not just tonight, not just the party. Always. When I was 6 and Logan was 4, he threw my favorite doll into the fireplace. I remember screaming, crying so hard my throat went raw. My mother didn't hug me. She didn't scold him. She said, "Well, you shouldn't have left it where he could reach it." I told her that wasn't fair. She sent me to my room for talking back. Logan got dessert that night. I didn't. In 3rd grade, I won 2nd place in the spelling bee. I came home with a ribbon clenched in my fist, proud like it was made of gold. My dad glanced at it and said, "Just 2nd? Maybe next year." When Logan won a participation ribbon in a soccer tournament, they bought him pizza and a new pair of cleats. When I got an A- on a math test in 8th grade, my dad sighed and said, "Well, at least you're trying." When Logan got the same grade a year later, he got a private tutor and a 30-minute pep talk about unlocking his brilliance. I was expected to help more around the house because I was older, because I was more mature. I did dishes. I vacuumed. I babysat Logan on weekends. When I asked why he never had to do the same, my mom said, "He's a boy. He'll have time to grow up later." So I grew up early. And quietly. By 16, I knew college was off the table. When I brought it up, my mother laughed. "College? For what? So you can waste 4 years and come out in debt." She told me I was better off getting a job at the supermarket. So I did. I stocked shelves while Logan played video games in his room. At 17, I got into a minor car accident on the way to work. Nothing serious, just a scraped bumper and a panic attack. I called my mom from the side of the road, voice shaking. She sighed and said, "You should have been more careful." Then she hung up. 2 years later, Logan dented his fender pulling out of a parking lot. My dad left work early to comfort him and told everyone at dinner how grown-up Logan had been for calling him first. At 19, I started an online shop. I resold clearance items, baby clothes, craft supplies, seasonal decor. I packed orders from my bedroom, sometimes falling asleep beside the label printer. I dealt with complaints, handled returns, learned to write copy that converted. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. When it finally grew stable enough to quit my job, no one asked how I did it. No one said congratulations. I used the money to buy this house. I didn't tell my parents at first. I just invited them over one day and handed them the keys. My mother cried. My father looked around, nodded in approval, then patted Logan on the back and said, "Now your sister has a place where we can all be together." They moved in the next month. They never asked. They never offered to help with bills. They just assumed the house was theirs, like everything else I'd built. I told myself it was fine, temporary. I convinced myself that if I gave enough space, money, patience, they'd finally see me. But when I told them I was pregnant, they didn't even flinch. My mother blinked and said, "Oh, I guess that's happening." My father asked, "Is the father in the picture?" I said no. They both nodded. No follow-up, no hug, no joy. That night at dinner, they told Logan. He laughed and said, "Guess we'll have to baby-proof the Xbox." I laughed too, because crying would have been worse. When I offered to hire someone part-time to help with order fulfillment, so I could rest in the last trimester, my dad asked, "Are you sure you can afford that? What about Logan's application fees?" I didn't even reply. I just swallowed it like everything else. But something inside me cracked. Not a scream. Not a snap. Just a quiet shift, like a door finally clicking shut from the inside. I started preparing, researching, asking questions, looking into the law, the paperwork, the process. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done pretending this was love. Because I didn't want my daughter's first memories to be of a mother always cleaning up someone else's mess, always apologizing for taking up space. Because I didn't want her to learn that silence is love, that sacrifice is affection, that being good means being invisible. No, not her, and not me, not anymore. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw a plate or scream into a pillow or demand an apology that would have meant nothing. Instead, I opened my laptop. In the quiet hours after midnight, with one hand on my belly and the other navigating browser tabs, I started reading. Housing law, property rights, tenant removal protocols in North Carolina, how to serve an eviction notice when the tenants are family, and you're the owner they keep pretending is just letting them stay. I read case studies. I downloaded templates. I watched videos from real estate lawyers with monotone voices and step-by-step breakdowns. I wasn't planning revenge. I was reclaiming my life. Every detail they'd ignored. Every receipt. Every utility bill in my name. Every mortgage payment auto-drafted from my business account. I organized them into folders. Digital. Physical. Labeled. Documented. If they were going to fight it, I'd be ready. It wasn't rage that moved me. It was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be kind. I wasn't trying to be the good daughter, the patient sister, the quiet girl who smiled through discomfort just to keep the peace. Because there was no peace here. There was only performance. And I was done playing my role. I ordered a stack of certified mail envelopes and printed 3 copies of the same letter. One for each of them. The text was clear, professional, no emotion, just facts. They had 30 days to vacate the premises. Any personal belongings left behind would be considered abandoned property. The hardest part wasn't writing the letters. It was realizing I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. For years, I had twisted myself into smaller shapes just to fit inside their world. I had made room where there was none, shrunk my voice, lowered my expectations, numbed the constant sting of being unseen. And they still didn't see me. They saw a house, a free place to stay, a daughter who didn't complain, a sister who would smile and hand over her savings if it meant Logan's future could shine just a little brighter. But they didn't see me, so I stopped making myself visible for them. I placed the letters in a drawer beside my bed. I'd serve them after the baby shower, after giving them one last chance to show me, just once, that they could be decent, that they could put me first, even for an hour. They didn't. Instead, they handed my moment to Logan on a silver platter and watched him devour it with a grin. So the next morning I made tea. The kitchen was a mess, soda cans still on the counter, frosting hardened on the floor I had already wiped once before. The The sink was full. The air smelled like cheap pizza and teenage sweat. I didn't clean it. I let it sit. I sipped my tea in silence while the sun crept slowly through the blinds, warm but indifferent. The baby shifted low in my belly, pressing into my spine. I winced, then breathed through it. I laid the 3 letters on the center of the table, evenly spaced, names printed in bold at the top. Walter Hartman, Diana Hartman, Logan Hartman. Underneath them, I placed copies of the deed, utility bills, mortgage statements, everything that made it clear, legally, financially, emotionally, that this was my home. Not theirs. Not anymore. At 7:02 a.m., I heard the floor creak, slippers dragging. My mother. She grunted as she shuffled into the kitchen, then froze mid-step when she saw the table. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. What is this? Her voice was still groggy, tinged with sleep. But underneath it, I could already hear the crack, the kind that comes right before a scream. I took another sip of tea. She stepped closer, squinting at the top page. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. 5 seconds. That's all it took. 5 seconds for her eyes to widen, her mouth to part, and her whole body to snap upright like she'd been electrocuted. What the hell is this? She barked, now fully awake. I didn't answer. Footsteps upstairs. A muffled thud. Then my father appeared in the hallway, hair messy, robe half-tied. He blinked into the light like he still hadn't woken all the way. What's going on? He mumbled. She's evicting us, my mother shrieked, waving the paper like it was on fire. Lily, she's throwing us out of the house. His face twisted in disbelief. What? Then Logan's door creaked open. He appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes and yawning, shirtless, hair flattened on one side. What's happening? He croaked. I finally looked up. I gave you 30 days, I said, my voice calm. It's all in writing. You're kidding, my father said, stepping forward to snatch a copy for himself. This is a joke, right? What is this? I sent certified letters yesterday, I replied. They'll arrive this afternoon. That's just a courtesy copy. Logan stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're kicking us out. His voice cracked halfway through. I nodded once. I'm taking my house back. My mother's hands were shaking now. After everything we've done for you, she screamed. You're doing this now, when you're about to give birth. No, I said softly. I'm doing this because I'm about to give birth. Logan slammed his palm against the table, making the stack of papers scatter like confetti. You're overreacting, he yelled. It was one party, one stupid party that got a little loud. Jesus, Lily, it wasn't even a big deal until you made it one. I stood slowly. You took my baby's shower, I said, voice still steady. You turned it into a frat night. You let people I didn't even know trash my home while I was scrubbing frosting off the floor. 8 months pregnant. Like the damn maid. We were celebrating, he shouted. Not me. My mother rounded the table like she might block me physically, like she could still control this with her presence alone. This isn't just your house, she cried. We've lived here for years. Yes, I said, rent-free. My father stepped forward, hands raised like he was calming a wild animal. Come on, he said. We're family. This is just emotions running high. You don't really want us gone. We'll clean up. We'll apologize. We'll make it right. I stared at him. No, I said. You'll gaslight me into thinking I'm overreacting, like you always do. Then you'll go back to pretending this house and my life are yours to manage. My mother's face flushed deep red. Her voice cracked in half. You ungrateful little brat, she spat. You think you're better than us because you started a stupid online store? You think that makes you important? We raised you. We sacrificed for you. I laughed. Just once. Quiet and dry. You sacrificed me for Logan. Every single time. My father's jaw clenched. That's not true. When I wanted to go to college, you told me it was a scam. When Logan wanted it, you spent thousands on tutors. When I worked night shifts, you told me to stop complaining. When Logan worked one summer job, you called him responsible. I stepped toward them. I paid the mortgage. I bought this house. And you still called it ours. Logan shoved his chair back, so hard it hit the wall. You've been waiting to do this, he shouted. You've been planning this the whole time, haven't you? Yes, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I have. He looked at me like I'd stabbed him. You're throwing your family out over a stupid party? Over a moment. That's sick. It wasn't a moment, I said. It was every moment. For years. This just made it obvious. My mother dropped into a chair and started crying. Loud, theatrical sobs, shaking her shoulders like she was auditioning for a daytime soap. Where are we supposed to go? She howled. What will people think? I looked at her, looked at all of them. That's not my problem anymore, I said. We won't leave, my mother snapped suddenly, eyes wild like a cornered animal. You can't just throw your own parents onto the street. I can, I said, and I have. She stared at the letter again, lips moving as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. This isn't legal, she whispered. I turned, opened the drawer, and pulled out a blue folder. Inside were certified mail receipts, notarized copies, the deed with my name and only my name. I laid them gently on the table, like evidence at a trial. It is, I said. Roger grabbed the folder and flung it across the room. Papers scattered like snow in a windstorm. You're heartless, he said through clenched teeth. No, I said. I'm finally protecting mine. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was heavy, dense. It pressed into the walls like steam. I want you all out by the end of the month, I added, my voice steady. I've arranged for a friend to help you pack if you need it. You're not serious, my father said, shaking his head. You'll change your mind. I looked him straight in the eye. No, I said. I won't. Then I turned and walked past the banner with its torn edges, the streamers sagging like wilted flowers, the crumbs on the carpet no one had bothered to vacuum. They had erased me. But I was done being invisible. The first 3 days were quiet. Too quiet, like the calm before a tornado. No one spoke to me. No one looked at me. They moved around the house like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, tiptoeing through the halls like I might detonate. Logan stopped blaring music from his room. My mother stopped pretending to clean the kitchen, though in truth, she never actually had. My father sat on the porch for hours, holding the same mug of coffee he never finished. But the silence didn't last. On day 4, the phone calls began. First it was Aunt Rachel, then Uncle Ted, then my mother's friend from church, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years but now texted. We're really concerned about you, sweetie. Is everything okay? Right. It was obvious. My mother had started her campaign. She'd painted me as unstable, hormonal, emotionally erratic because of the baby. I could imagine her voice, trembling with performative concern as she said things like, she's making rash decisions. We're just trying to support her. We don't want to stress her out, but we're worried. They dressed it up as love, but it wasn't. It was manipulation, pressure disguised as kindness, a net made of guilt, cast wide enough for every whisper to land in my lap. The next day, my father knocked on my bedroom door. We'll start contributing, he said. Rent, bills. We should have done that before. You're right, I said. You should have. He nodded like that settled it, like one admission erased years of negligence. But think about what this looks like to the rest of the family, he added, voice gentle. And there it was, the shame card. I smiled, walked away. On day 7, Logan tried a new tactic. Over dinner, he muttered, I talked to Coach Harrison. He said if I defer a year, I might lose my scholarship. We have to move right now. I can't focus. I can't even sleep. I nodded slowly. Tough. He slammed his fork down. You don't even care. No, I said, but you didn't care when I was 8 months pregnant and scrubbing frosting off the floor. He stood up and stormed out. The front door rattled as it slammed. On day 10, I got a call from my business partner. Hey, just a heads up, she said hesitantly. Someone emailed me anonymously. Said you might be emotionally unstable and shouldn't be running the business alone after the baby comes. They even suggested I start looking at new leadership. My stomach dropped for just a second. Then I breathed in, slowly, and asked her to forward the email. She did. The language, word for word from texts my mother had sent me in the past. Same phrasing, same passive-aggressive tone, same fingerprints. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer. On day 12, they stopped pretending. My mother cornered me in the hallway. Her breath was fast, eyes sharp like broken glass. I know you think you're strong now, she hissed, low enough so no one else would hear, but when that baby comes, when you're exhausted and overwhelmed and crying at 3 a.m., we'll see how long this lasts. I didn't flinch. She leaned closer, mouth curled. Don't come crawling back when you realize you need us. I looked her dead in the eye. I already realized I don't. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. I made tea again. Sat on the back porch. The air was still. The stars looked indifferent. On day 16 it came. A knock at the door. Sharp. Official. I opened it to find a sheriff's deputy holding a large envelope. He gave a polite nod, asked for my father by name, then handed it over. My dad opened the letter right there in the living room, eyes scanning fast, then stopping. He punched the wall. Court filing, he muttered. They had hoped I wouldn't go through with it, that I'd threaten but never act, that the pregnancy would make me soft, confused, vulnerable. They didn't realize motherhood wasn't weakening me. It was making me dangerous. Later that night, my father paced the kitchen, ranting. She's crazy, he spat, voice louder than it had been in weeks. She's going to ruin her kid's life without us. I stepped into the room without a word. His girlfriend, yes, he'd invited her to move in months ago without asking, was sitting at the island. She'd been at the baby's shower. She'd watched everything unfold and said nothing. I looked her straight in the eye. You helped ruin my baby's shower, I said evenly. You might want to leave before I make a list of every underage person who was drinking that night, and include your name when I report it. She paled. She left. Day 28. The suitcases began to appear. First just one, parked by the front door, like someone might be taking a trip. Then a second, a box, a laundry basket filled with cords and chargers and old hoodies. The hallway grew narrower with each passing hour. They weren't talking to me anymore, just packing, slowly, bitterly. I didn't rush them. I didn't gloat. I just waited. Logan passed me in the hallway one evening, dragging a duffel bag behind him. He stopped, looked me up and down. You think you'll finally get peace after this? I don't think, I said. I know. He rolled his eyes. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed, it wasn't the tense kind anymore. Not loaded, not waiting to explode. It was peaceful, clean. I stood in the middle of the living room. The carpet vacuumed, the streamers gone, the banner long thrown away. But the light hit differently now. The space looked bigger, like it had been holding its breath for too long and finally exhaled. I walked to the nursery, opened the closet, folded a few onesies, ran my hand over the soft pink blanket in the crib. Outside, the wind stirred gently through the trees. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. The days that followed were quiet in a different way. No more slammed doors. No more whispered phone calls. No more pacing or yelling or sobbing in the kitchen, just loud enough for me to hear. It was as if the house had entered a kind of mourning. Like it finally realized the chaos that had lived inside. It was being exorcised, piece by piece. I woke up earlier, slept deeper, ate full meals without someone commenting on my portions or asking if I was sure I could afford organic. I started working again, not 10 hours a day like before, but just enough to keep the rhythm of my shop alive. I answered emails, sketched out a few new product ideas, and scheduled my maternity pause without guilt. For the first time since I was 17, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was preparing for something that belonged entirely to me. I didn't call anyone in the family, and none of them called me, but I heard things. Relatives talk. People whisper at weddings and funerals and grocery stores. Apparently, Logan dropped out of Stanford after his first year. Couldn't keep up. Couldn't focus without someone cleaning up after him, telling him when to eat, when to study, when to breathe. He moved back in with my parents. But that didn't last. They ended up staying with my uncle, Diana's brother, but only for a few weeks. Too many differences. Too many expectations. Too little space. They bounced around after that. Last I heard, they were renting a small place an hour away, complaining about the cost of living and how kids these days had no respect. But that's not my story anymore. That's the difference. For years, I carried them like extra limbs. Heavy, needy, always in the way but too familiar to cut loose. Now I carry no one but myself. And the life growing inside me. I don't have baby shower photos. None that I'd want to frame, at least. But I have the ones I took weeks later, me sitting on the nursery floor, sunlight pouring through the window, folding tiny socks into neat rows. No guests, no decorations, no one clapping or hooting or turning it into something else. Just me, just peace. Some days I walk into the kitchen and still see the ghosts of what used to be. My mother crying at the table, Logan slamming the papers to the floor, my father holding the eviction letter like it was a betrayal instead of a boundary. And I smile, because they weren't wrong. I was planning it. I had waited for the right moment, not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood something no one ever taught me. Love is not about letting people hurt you just because they say they care. Love is boundaries. Love is protection. Love is making sure your child grows up in a home where no one steps over her mother kneeling on the floor and calls that normal. I don't miss them. Not really. Sometimes I miss the idea of family. The one I used to pretend I had. But then I feel her move, my daughter, and I remember that I'm building something new now. Something better. Something that starts with me.